Welcome to the Canarian International Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Mossy, and I am an alcoholic.
And my name is Mick, and I am serving as secretary with Mossy. Please join me in a moment's silence to remember the still suffering alcoholic, both inside and outside this meeting.
My name is Jane. I'm an alcoholic.
Okay.
Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. AA has no dues or fees. It is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
In this meeting, we celebrate AA birthdays. If you are celebrating a birthday today, please message the host today in the chat, and we will celebrate together before the general sharing part of the meeting.
And warm welcome comes out to any newcomers and returning to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the chat is now disabled to the end of the meeting, except for the meeting host guys. And that's it. That's our simple introduction. So today we have Michele P., who celebrated 50 years sobriety last month. She's an amazing lady, an amazing story, and I'm delighted to have her here. And Ruben, my apologies to you, sir. Take it away there, Michele.
Thank you, Mossy, and thank you, Mick. Thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. My name is Michele. I am an alcoholic. Before I start, I always like to invite our higher power into the room, even though I know our higher power is here, but this is my form of meditation to a breath. So I'm going to breathe my higher power in and myself out 3 times. So if you indulge me, please. Breathe God in, self out. In, out. In, out. Thank you. I do that to remind myself that my ego's not in charge of whatever comes out of my mouth. Because you're never going to get rid of ego. My sobriety date is February 27th, 1975. I have a home group. It's called Living Sober Group. It's an in-person meeting here in my area. I live in northeastern Pennsylvania, between nowhere and no place, I always say, because there's no big cities around me. I'm in a very rural area. I have a sponsor. Her name is Linda. And I've always had a sponsor, and I've always had a home group in these 50 years that I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous. And just a little bit about my past, a little bit about history. I'm not going to go into any kind of drunken walk. We all know how to drink. We all know, we know that. So, but I am the youngest of 5 children. My father was an active alcoholic, and in 1974, he developed a wet brain at the age of 58. And in 1974, little was discussed about alcoholism or anything to do with alcohol, actually. But it was kind of more widely accepted that, my father was basically classified as the town drunk. And I didn't like people saying that, but I had heard it a few times. My father went to the hospital first, and that's when the doctor told me he had a wet brain, and I asked what that was. Well, he called it by Wernicke psychosis or Korsakoff syndrome, and I said, "Well, it's that," and he said, "A wet brain," and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "It's irreversible brain damage caused by chronic alcoholism." Now, I had taken my father to the hospital. He didn't know who I was. But long story short, he ended up in a skilled nursing home for 9.5 years until he died. So that was number one, that thought of alcoholics alcohol or alcoholics came into my head. Now, I was already a blackout drunk for many years, and I hated my father. I thought I hated my father. I didn't really hate him. But that started like the thought process, actually, of the way I was drinking. I was being called out by my husband a lot, but nobody else called me out about my drinking or how much I was drinking. My husband never understood how I used to get drunk so fast because he didn't know I was sneaking alcohol into the house in the form of vodka, which I didn't normally drink because, you can't smell vodka. But he could never understand how did you get so drunk? You only had 2 drinks. Well, I drank like a fifth of vodka. I mean, I don't know what you call it over there, but I graduated to a quart eventually. But anyway, so that was the number one thing that started me. Somewhere in my subconscious, I wasn't consciously aware of this at the time. So it was a normal Wednesday night in February, and my friend came over, and my high school, I still had my high school friends. I still have my high school friends, 2 of them to this day. But they weren't drinkers. I had that set of, the people who didn't, and then finding the ones that did. So she came over, and I was in a blackout, so I don't remember any of this. She told me later. I started to tell her everything I was doing, like how I had the big woman alcoholic purse, how I would go to different liquor stores, how I would start it with a pint of vodka, and then I graduated to a quart. But then I would hide it we lived in a 2nd floor apartment at the time, and our backyard was the river. I mean, we had a river bank and then the river. And that's where I would dispose of my empty vodka bottles. I would stand on my little porch on the 2nd floor and toss them down the riverbank. And I told her everything. I told her just the whole thing. And all she said to me was, I don't know anything about alcohol or alcoholism. She said, I'll wait till John comes home. My husband played cards on Wednesday night. And you tell him what you told me. So I don't know how long passed till my husband came home. I have no recall of that. Even if I wasn't in a blackout, I'm old now. I wouldn't remember anyway. But he came home. She said, hi, John, bye, John. And she left. And I proceeded to tell my husband exactly the same things I was telling her. Now I'm in I don't know if you're a blackout drinker, you have kind of like a brownout area where you're starting to come around. You're starting to remember a couple things. And I remembered a couple things. I don't remember all of it, but I remembered a couple things. And I start telling him all the same things I told her, apparently. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, why am I doing this? And I wanted to pull the words back in my mouth. And I was like I remember his face. I just remember him. We were standing in the living room. I remember his face, and his eyes were dead. The second catalyst, I was always afraid my husband was going to leave me because of my drinking. His father was also an alcoholic, and my husband really never drank very much. So my husband said to me, so what are you going to do about it? I said, oh, I'm going to go to AA. And he said, all right, let's go to bed. And we went to bed. And I'll tell you the honest God's truth. The only thing I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous was from a movie called Days of Wine and Roses that was made in 1962 when I was 12 years old. And I must have seen it on TV. But I remember Jack Klugman, the actor Jack Klugman's character, standing at the podium saying his name was Jim and he was an alcoholic. And I know that he helped Jack Lemmon, his character, get sober. And that's all I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew nothing else. But the funny thing is, I was calling the AA answering service long before I ever told my friend that. Back then, we had somebody manning a phone from their house, actually. But when you would call the number, back then they were in our intergroup office, and they would answer the phone. And I used to call them a lot. And I used to call them for my father. And I used to call them for a father who had stopped communicating, who was in a nursing home, who had irreversible brain damage. So you know who I was really calling him for. And at some point he caught on. I know he probably caught on from the first time I called because I was drunk. And all I remember him asking me was, does your father admit he has a problem? And I said, no. And he said, well, if he ever does, run, don't walk to an AA meeting. So that's the two things I knew about. I don't know. I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous from the movie. I looked it up in the phone book. I found the number. I called the number. That's all I knew. The other thing that was always in my head is I wanted to have children. And I didn't want to have children and be an alcoholic mother. I thought it was hard enough having an alcoholic father. So they were like the three catalysts, but I still had no desire to stop drinking. I did not want to stop drinking. So I called the AA answering service again, and now I got the list of meetings. And there was one a night, 9:00 p.m. at night. So we could sneak into these church basements under the cloak of darkness, whether it was Eastern Standard or Daylight Savings Time. It didn't matter. It was always dark at 9:00. And the first meeting actually wasn't even in a church. It was in the nursing home my father was a patient at. So my husband and I, they were all open speaker meetings. So my husband and I went to see my father. I think that, I guess the visiting hours were over at 9, I would assume. And we walked around the nursing home. We didn't know where the meeting was. We thought there'd be a big like sign or something outside, outside of a door saying AA meeting, or something. No. And we wouldn't ask anybody, but there wasn't really many people around because it was late. So we were actually on our way out and turned our head, both of us looked to this open door to our left, and there was a table with ceramic praying hands on it and a bunch of we didn't know what it was at the time, literature, and there were books on it. And at that moment, this man walked up to the front, and my husband bolted into the meeting. And not knowing even if it was an AA meeting, but he went in, and my husband was a very quiet man. And I'm standing in the doorway, frozen, and he's shaking hands with the man, and he goes, no, it's my wife. She thinks she has a problem. So what does Michele do? The natural thing Michele always did. I bounced in the room with a big smile on my face, like Susie Sunshine, here I come. It's cute, fit 25, here I come. And I'm like 7 people at the meeting. John and I made 9. There was a couple spouses found out later. They didn't read all the stuff that they read at other meetings, the how it works and all that. They did the preamble and the steps and traditions, and sat down, and 2 guys got up, shared their story, and it was basically a drunkalogs. And it was about them being in World War II. World War II. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And then I noticed the scrolls on the wall. And I saw that 3rd step. And I saw that word God. I'm like, no way. But for some reason, God had other plans for me that I didn't know about at the time. And at the end of the meeting, I asked the guy across from me, what do we do now? He said, go to another meeting. So I went to another meeting and asked again, what do I do? Go to another meeting. At some point, somebody told me to buy a big book. Bought a big book. Nobody ever told me to read it. And somebody said, oh, you should have the 12 and 12. So I bought the 12 and 12. $4. I still have it. Anyway, it was about 2 months in of these World War II stories that I was really, literally, if my husband wasn't with me, I tell you, as sure as I'm sitting here, I would have never gone back. 2 months in, I said, where are the young people at? Somebody said, oh, there's a younger group in the next county. It's like 8 miles from one to the other where I lived. So I said, okay. So my husband and I went to this younger group. They were younger than World War II people, but they were still older than me. But at least they were in their 30s and 40s. So that night I walked in that meeting, I joined that home group because I heard that you're supposed to join a home group, and I heard that you're supposed to have a sponsor. And I asked this woman who was sitting I talked to her a little bit before the meeting started, but she was 5'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, and she sat like a lady, and I wanted to be just like her. I knew nothing about her nothing about her. All I know was what I saw, her outside. I was never going to be 5'2". I was 5'7", and I'm not now, but I was. And I didn't have, but I just wanted to have her composure, I guess. I was a big mouth. I was put on a great act for everybody. I always acted as if everything was, how are you? Fine. I was always fine. And that's just was the way I dealt with life. So anyway, she said, okay, I'll be a sponsor. She, back then, no cell phones or anything, hands me her phone number on a piece of paper and said, call me every day for the first year. And I thought, okay. And then I walked away and thought, what the hell am I going to talk to this woman about every day? But for some reason I did it. And I called her and I bitched about my day. And then she would say these two things. Well, Michele, this too shall pass. Pick up the phone before you pick up a drink. That's all she ever said. Talk to you tomorrow. That's all she ever said. And at that time, there's a lot of fellowship recovery going on. We did a lot of things together. We did picnics. We went to dances. We went to other areas. We were at each other's houses. But we weren't talking about, I'm not saying I didn't hear, things AA related during this time, but it wasn't anybody sitting down saying that you need, let's, like my sponsor saying, let's talk about the first step, nothing like that. So it's a little card, with that meeting list. I saw, I looked at it again and I saw on Thursday night, there was a 12-step and 12 tradition meeting. And that was a closed meeting. Now, by this time, I think my husband stayed with me to go to meetings so I went from hating AA to liking AA, and eventually I started loving AA. So I went to that meeting. I walked in and there was all these people I knew from other meetings, and I'm thinking, what is this, like some underground secret society or something? Like, why aren't you people talking about steps and all this, if this is a 12-step and 12 tradition meeting? Well, this is in my head. I'm not saying this stuff out loud. I never said anything negative out loud to anybody at that time. And I still probably don't. But anyway, that's where I did my first time. I did my steps was at that meeting. And I did my 4th and 5th step with a woman named Mary, who wasn't my sponsor. And I remember telling my sponsor that I was going to that meeting, and she said, oh, that's good. That's good. 11 months, a bottle of liquor made its way into, my husband was self-employed at the time. Somebody brought him, everybody gave him liquor at Christmas. None of those bottles came in, but somebody brought one to the house in January, and he said, I got to get rid of this. And he hid it somewhere. We had a disagreement. He was going somewhere. I said, I showed him. Lived in a 3-room apartment. Didn't take me long to find that bottle. I couldn't tell you what it was. I have no idea. Got out my 12-ounce water glass, poured it, and all of a sudden, pick up the phone before you pick up a drink popped in my head. I called Ruth. I told her. She said, well, if you want to drink it, drink it. If you don't, don't. I said, what? And she repeated it. And I said, huh? And she repeated it. She said, Michele, why'd you call me? If you wanted to drink it, you would have just drank it. So I dumped the bottle down the drain. But back then you had phones on the wall. I had a long cord. I had to make sure she heard it, like she cared. Bloop, 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 with the phone over the sink. Then she asked me if I was ready to get honest. I didn't understand. I thought I was perfectly honest. You like my new haircut? Oh my God, why would you get your hair cut that way? Stuff like that. I was like that kind of honest. I was mean honest. So I'm going to fast forward to my 10th anniversary. I had not sponsored anybody in those 10 years. I had 3 sons during that time. And it was when our first son was born, that my husband stopped going to meetings with me. So that was when I already started loving AA. And AA was growing. In the 80s, it was growing. And I was at my 10th anniversary. And this is where ego comes in again. And I stood up at that podium with that, because we had the group I belonged to used to have 150 people at a meeting. Anniversary nights, it could swell to 200-300. In this little dank, dark church basement, we were squished in there like, man, sardines in a can. But anyway, packed. And I threw my arm up in the air with that chip in my hand, and I said, look what I did. The big smile on my face. And as soon as I said it, my only way I could describe it, I had a visceral reaction internally. My heart cried. I can only say it that way. My dog is trying to climb on my lap, and I don't want him on my lap. Anyway, I was Godsmacked. This was probably the term I've heard on Zoom. I never heard it before. Was Godshot. I didn't want that meeting to end. I thought everybody was going to call me out, blah, blah, blah. Sat down, nobody called me out, nobody said a word, went home. About 2 weeks later, a gentleman who celebrated that night with me, his name was John C., and she celebrates 17 years to my 10. He said, Michelle, I do a God as I understand a meeting on Sunday mornings. Why don't you come to that? I respected this man very much. He became my spiritual advisor. And I went to that God as I understand a meeting. And that's when the whole world opened up to me. So John C. and I went to the steps together. I used to go an hour early. I used to meet him an hour early, and we went through the 12 steps together. And he had such I can't describe it, but a way of getting through to me that nobody before had ever gotten through to me in a condensed, kind of methodical way, explaining my questions and making me understand the first step that I have to take 100%. I had heard this before without reservations. Well, I admit I was powerless over alcohol. I knew that, but my life was still unmanageable because of everybody in my life. And I had was made to see where my behavior was causing the unmanageability, not necessarily someone else's. Joe and Charlie talk a lot about the foundation, the cornerstone, the keystone. So my foundation was half steady. So how I stayed that sober that 10 years was only through the grace of God and the fact that I had 3 small children, and my husband was very supportive of anything I did with Alcoholics Anonymous, whether it was just going to a meeting or whatever it was. So now my foundation got really firm during this period of time. And then when I was asked to come to believe that a power greater than me could restore me to sanity, I got hung up on everything, because that's just, I'm going to challenge you on everything. So sanity, he just explained it to me as right thinking. Now I have to make a decision. So that's my cornerstone now. And now I got to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand. How am I going to, I was turning my will and at least my life over to these people, this group of drunks all those years. I was doing everything. I was very compliant. I was extremely compliant. I did everything they asked of me, and I, without question, I never questioned anything they asked me, as stupid as it sounds. I did a lot of mental eye rolls at the time, but I did it. I remember when I joined that group that night, they handed me a vacuum, and I'm like, what's this for? And they said, for you to vacuum, and walked away from me. And I was like, what? Like, but 2 months, all that 2 months before, I was cleaning dirty ashtrays. I was doing all that stuff, but to hand me a vacuum was like an affront to me. How dare you? Ego. So now I get the keystone in by making a decision to turn my will and my life over, right? But the keystone was not the group of drunks at this point. It started to change. There was a shift going on. And I can't explain how or why or when, but some kind of a shift started happening. And I know, because I can't explain, because it came from power greater than me. It didn't come from Michele. And I started to place that keystone in, because in the 12 and 12, I always love the 12 and 12 explanation of the third step, when it says the key of willingness will unlock the door, and self-will will slam it shut. Because I had this turn my will over like I had a problem, and all of a sudden it's going to float off into the heavens, It doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. My self-will pulled it back. So every time I slammed that door shut, it came to me that I was slamming the door shut, but I still had the key of willingness. So I just kept trying. That's the keystone, to keep the cornerstone, the foundation all together. I live in the Keystone State, by the way. So there's my foundations. There's the foundation right there. That's the beginning. And then I have to do some work. Now I got to do some house cleaning steps. When I did that 4th step and 5th step in that meeting, I thought I would just lie. I was never afraid to do any of these steps because I'm a liar. So John and C and I went through the inventory. And I found out, because I had kept the original one, I found out I really didn't lie. I might have missed some people, I might have missed some things, but I didn't blatantly lie. And that kind of surprised me at that point. So I shared I made the inventory, I went through that whole thing, and then I admitted to God, myself, and another human being, which was John C. at the time, the exact nature of my wrongs. And then I got to 6 and 7, and man, I used to hear all the time they were the forgotten steps. And they were the forgotten steps because they're one paragraph each in the big book, but they are not the forgotten steps. These steps are these are crucial turning point. Maybe that's why they're in the middle. I don't know. Humbly, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, and then humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. The amount of humility it takes to ask our higher power to remove our shortcomings was something I lacked the first time around, and something I basically didn't even understand, because only God could remove these character defects. But I have to be willing and open to that change. I know it's not a conference approved, but that Drop the Rock is a good resource for helping with to understand that 6 and 7, how crucial they are. So my inventory showed me the self-pity, self-righteousness, all the self-egocentric things had to be worked on. I was full of self-pity. I inherited that trait from my mother, by the way. God bless her, but I really knew how to feel sorry for myself. And I had a lot of people co-sign my bullshit, honestly. If I had your father, I would be doing that too, So now I go refer back to my 4th step and make a list of all persons we had harmed. We became willing to make amends and all. I did that with my father early on. I took that. I went to that nursing home to a nonverbal father, brought him a box of chocolate-covered cherries because he loved them. He gobbled them down as I was making my amends to him. Then he pulled the cover over and he turned his back to me like he just went to sleep. And I walked out of that nursing home, and honest to God, I felt lighter. He had no reaction to it. It didn't matter. It was not, I don't need validation. I don't need, I'm sorry. I understand. I don't need any of that. I need to just do it. I just needed to do it. So I did it again. My father passed by this time. But I was not afraid. I was not afraid of making amends. And I still have people I have no idea where they are. Some I knew had passed, but I'm always willing for those ones I do not know where they are. And there's only 1 or 2 now. I'm always have that willingness to make amends when I can. Because it says make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And you gotta be careful with that one too. But thankfully I didn't have that in my past, that I cheated on my husband or anything like that. But I'm not going to clear my conscience to hurt someone else. And then we get to my favorites. Now we're getting to what the old timers would refer to as maintenance steps. And I refer to them as growth steps, because it says in the 10th step, we've now entered the world of spirit. So I'm going to continue to take personal inventory, and when I'm wrong, promptly admit it. And when I continue to take personal inventory, people always told me, oh yeah, when you go to bed, you review your day, blah, 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 and the 10th step. But no, I think that got that a little bit wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's not the way I do it. I do the 10th step all day long. From the moment I wake up, I say, thy will be done. I brush my teeth, I say, I can't, he can't, so I'll let him. Done this for 50 years. Maybe not quite, well, coming up on 50, that I start doing this. And then I go about my day. My world is a little bit small right now, but it wasn't always. And I make, I think about my thoughts, my actions, my deeds, like everything. I review my 10th step practice I do every day. So that means I watch. I watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. I watch. And then if I see something, I ask God to remove it. And if it's something that's sticking with me all day long, I turn my attention to someone I can help. And that could be inside or outside of these rooms. It could be just being kind to somebody in the grocery store. It could be, somebody drops something and you pick it up for them. It could be holding a door open for someone. It doesn't matter what it is, but I have to get out of self. And that's the only way I've learned that I can get out of self is by turning my attention to someone else. Sometimes it's somebody I know is suffering for something, and I could just pray for them. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. I think God honors all our attempts of everything we try to do, even if we don't do everything perfect. And then I cease fighting. I cease fighting. So the 10th step promises. I can't, but it does say in here, it says we have now entered the world of spirit on page 84. And the 10th step promises by this time, sanity will have returned. We seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it like a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we find that this has happened automatically. We see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given to us without any thought on our part. It just comes. It just comes. I can't tell you the day that I stopped thinking about drinking. I have no memory of that at all. I know the last time I thought about drinking, I was going to a meeting. I was in like that 9-year period, maybe. And I thought, I had $5 in my pocket, in my wallet. And I was driving to the meeting, and I thought, I wonder how much a bottle of vodka costs now. And it was like, where'd that come from? I mean, really, I was just literally driving to the meeting, not listening to the radio, and that thought popped in my head. So I got to the meeting, and I told on myself. That's the last time I thought about drinking. Anything related to alcohol. Never been tempted. That's the miracle, though. We're not fighting it, neither avoiding temptation. Hey, listen, life happens and there's alcohol everywhere. So I had to learn real quickly how to be around alcohol. Because I got sober in February, and my first time being around it was July. That was a party, barbecue. And I was sitting in a spot where the bar was right next to me. And one of my friends asked me to make her a gin and tonic. That was my drink. And then I see my husband, who's down the other end, get up on the picnic table and walk down the picnic table saying, I'll do it. But, I've been around alcohol. I mean, you're never going to avoid it. This is the important part. We've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. I take that neutrality to not only include alcohol, but everything, because there's so much going on right now. It has been. I mean, I lived through the 60s. So, you know, I mean, I saw all that stuff. I reacted to everything that was going on, Vietnam protests and all that other stuff. But now I'm in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. I extend that out into the world because Michele lived out in the world. Michele was worried about Idi Amin and the Skylab was going to fall on my house. I mean, I was all kinds of crazy, even when I got sober. So, I mean, I have to stay out of the world. I have to, because I'm in this position of neutrality. I'm safe and protected. We have not sworn on, and we have not sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. This is our experience. That's how we react, so long as we stay in fit spiritual condition. So why is Michele talking to you at 50 years of sobriety? Because I'm sober today, just like the rest of us. Everybody in here, we're all just sober for today. And I need to stay in fit spiritual condition. I can't play with this. And I'm going to get to that in the next, the 11th step. So, but, you know, it's like so simple, but yet, like they say, it's so simple for complicated people, right? So 11 steps sets out to prevent meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. Prayer and meditation. Boy, did I really suck at that. I never prayed in my life, except when I was a kid, you know, we used to do this really scary prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. I don't know if any of you ever heard that one, but it's kind of scary for a little kid. I pray the Lord, if I should die before I wake. Well, anyway, prayer meditation. Prayer for me, I was told, get on your knees and pray, get on your knees and pray, get on your knees and pray. I was raised in a Methodist church where we did not get on our knees and pray. So Michele, of course, being so compliant, got on her knees and tried to pray. And all I did was, my knees hurt, my back hurt, everything. I was so distracted. And it dawned on me that God honors my prayers wherever I say them, how I say them, what I say. And I get very relaxed with running water. So if I was doing the dishes, it was a good time for me to think about God and talk to God. And meditation was even harder because I have a very busy brain and I was always being distracted. And somebody said, just don't worry about that. Just all of a sudden that noise that's in your head will become one note, like a one musical note, and you'll disregard it. I tried transcendental meditation. I tried all kinds of meditation. Meditation for me is through the breath. That's the breath. God gave us breath for life. So in December 1st, 2022, my husband and I were out for dinner. About a 15-minute drive. He had his favorite meal, linguine with red clam sauce. We talked about going back to Scotland. We talked about getting a dog. We were driving home. About four minutes into the drive, he made a funny noise. I said, what's the matter? He said, my stomach's bothering me. So maybe it was the food. He said, no, I never had a pain like this before. A minute and a half later, my husband said, I'm dying. And he pulled off the road and put the car in park and died. I'm on the phone with 911, waiting for the ambulance. They wanted me to get him out of the car. I couldn't get him out of the car. He weighed more than me. I was on a busy highway, dark highway, dark. There was really no street lights there. Cars were whizzing by. If I got my husband out of the car, he would have crashed to the pavement. They got there, the ambulance got there, and they threw him in the ambulance within seconds, and they got a weak pulse, took him to the hospital. He had a DNR, but that's a do not resuscitate, but they didn't abide by that. And they took him, got a weak pulse and put him on a vent. I had called my son who lived close by. He came with his wife. My son drove our car up to the hospital. We got there. He was already on a vent, which he did not want to be on. They found out he was brain dead. I said, take him off the vent. And I sat there with my husband all night and watched to wait for him to die again at noon the next day. My kids wanted me not to drive home from the hospital. I said, I want to be in my home. I came home. The first thing I did once I came home, I was up all night awake with my husband. And I went out on my back deck, 6 degrees Fahrenheit, which is very cold. And in my back deck, there's a mountain. My backyard's a mountain. Where the house ends in the deck, it goes up in a mountain. I sat out there, I looked up at the mountain, naked trees, and I talked to God. The reason I wanted to be in my home was because I wanted to be alone with my God and not worry about my grandchildren and my kids. And I needed that time. I needed that time to be spiritually connected. I was dying. I was crushed inside, but I needed that time. And I knew that was my solution, was to be with God. And then my son came, picked me up. We went, because everybody was sending food to his house, and we ate there. And I had to put on a facade. The facade, Michele, not to the point like I used to, but at least that I didn't get my grandchildren upset. My boys were suffering. My boys were grieving too. Everybody was grieving. After it was time to go home, my son wanted me to sleep there. I said, thank you very much, but I just really want to be in my home. And I came home and I did the exact same thing. I went out in the dark and I sat on that deck and I talked to God. And I talked to God every single night until for 3 months, I got this dog, because somebody told me that John was telling me to get a dog. And when he was a little puppy, it was still pretty cold out there, and I didn't want to take him out at night, like, and sit out there, because I would sit out there for half an hour sometimes. Praying only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. God's will for me was not to lay in bed and pull the covers over my head and feel sorry for myself and make it all about me, like I was the only one suffering. I was with my husband for 54 years. We celebrated 50 years of marriage in June of that year. I was 18 years old when I met my husband. We were both 18 years old. And, I went from my mother's house to John's house, John and my house, so I never lived alone. So I had to have the power to carry out the will of God, which was to get my butt out of bed every morning. I sponsor someone in Belfast. I sponsor someone in England. I sponsor someone in South Africa. I sponsor 3 local people. I had to do what I had to do to make arrangements. I had to do everything I needed to do. I got my puppy. And I thank God every day. I thank God for all he's given me, all he's taken away, and all he's left me. The only reason that I feel this way today is because I sat out there one night talking to God, and sometimes I would curse my husband, and I don't even know how much time I have. And I got filled with gratitude that my husband didn't have to suffer, and gratitude that I was able to carry forward. So now I've had this spirit. I'm going to move on because I think I'm running out of time. I had this spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. Now I'm going to practice these principles in all my affairs. Not easy to do all the time. I start sponsoring people. The first batch of women I sponsored, I was a hot mess. They stayed sober in spite of me. Trust me. Ego was still blaring, But all I could say, if you are like anywhere in the beginning or having any doubts that this program is going to help you or not, trust me, I've gone through many of those moments of Well, I'm sober 10 years. Well, I'm sober 15. Well, I'm sober 20. Well, I'm sober 25. Then I started seeing those people that were sober 25 going back out drinking and dying. And I start seeing those people with after 20 years, it's hard to see anybody in rooms of AA. I just stayed. That's the one thing I did right. I stayed. And they used to say, don't quit before the miracle happens. I didn't even know what they were talking about. But I know that I didn't understand the book. I didn't like the language. I didn't like any of it. I didn't have a God. I was like, blah, 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 blah. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And they all said, yet. So the bottom line is, does the program work? Absolutely, if you work it. You know, and how it works is rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. I would say never have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Bill didn't he wanted to put never in there, but he didn't. He was told not that rarely, because there were people relapsing. And who's to judge whether somebody's doing right or wrong anyway? But I feel from in my soul the people that I know in my life, and I've seen hundreds upon hundreds of people die from this. Hundreds and hundreds. Well, how much time do I have? Just put up your hand.
You got whatever it takes, Michelle.
How many?
As long as it takes, you'll finish your story.
Okay. Thank you. I'm almost done anyway. I just didn't want to. But yeah, if you're new, like I said, and you know, we didn't do the taking people to the big book back. And when I got sober, we didn't do all that stuff. And we didn't do things the way things are done today. And we didn't have language that they have today. I think the 80s was a big change in Alcoholics Anonymous in the United States. I always say that it's when Betty Ford ruined AA, you know, former First Lady of the United States, when she started opening the Betty Ford clinics and all of these rehabs start popping up. And nothing against rehabs. Trust me, I have nothing against a rehab. What I have trouble with is the swinging door that they became. And the way that people could go for 28 days and just to, you know, get away from it all. And also they made people go to AA, and then the courts made people come to AA, and these people did not want to stay sober. And then we had the whole thing with drugs addicts coming into AA. Oh my God, that caused such a controversy. But I was in a position of neutrality. And I never got engaged with any of that stuff. You know, I never did. I needed to work on Michele one day at a time. And what Joe or Bill or Mary or John, whatever was doing was none of my business. Why is a spiritual question? Only God has the answer. I was told that. And I do believe that. Like, why am I an alcoholic when I said my whole life I would never be like my father? And here I am in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a spiritual question. It doesn't matter why you are. So it's all these barriers that I threw up. I don't have a God. Don't worry about it. Don't get hung up on the God thing, they told me. I didn't get hung up on the God thing. See, I was compliant. That's about the only word I could use. I was very, very compliant. But Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, I remember, you know, I buried my father, my mother, my sister that I was extremely close to died very quickly of ovarian cancer in 1998. She was only 56 years old, and I was very, very close to my sister. I have another sister, but this one sister I was very close to. And you know, friends and sponsors and sponsees that, you know, I've seen so much. I've lost so friends. I've lost so much, so many people in my life. But they gave me something. Every one of them gave me something before they left this earth. And I also believe that my body is just a vessel. My son and I last year went to Scotland. John, and my husband's name was John. We were planning a trip back to Scotland. So I wanted to take the year before I went to Belfast, and I met Mossy the year before in England, and I went to the other side of England for one of my sponsees after that. And I took my husband's ashes with me. My husband loved Dartmoor. So he's in Dartmoor. And I took him in the, whatever the anthem coast up in Northern Ireland. I forget what that body of water is called now. The Irish Sea, I don't know. North Sea, I don't know. But anyway, he's there. He's in Scotland. He's in Loch Ness. He's in Loch Ness. He's going to find Nessie for everybody. He's in Queensferry in Scotland. He's going to Spain, you know, because I want to do things that I can honor his memory. We traveled a lot. We were blessed. We went to China. We went all over the world. Went all over the world. In our 60s, we started traveling. So it's like looking at things to honor people, or doing things for other people. And even though my husband's passed on, it was his vessel I'm putting in the water. His spirit's not there anymore. His spirit's not in those ashes. It's just a vessel. But I do things to honor him because he honored me. And how many people are lucky enough to say they were in a relationship for 54 years? And he loved Alcoholics Anonymous. You know what he said early when we used to go with me all the time? He used to say, everybody in the world should learn to live like this. The world would be a better place. So again, if you're new, you struggle, pick up the phone before you pick up a drink. That was so, I'm so grateful to Ruth for drilling that into my head every day. And trust me, one day at a time, every day you wake up sober. And whatever your practice, just get a little practice. It doesn't have to be anything that's going to take a half an hour of your time, or an hour, you know. I mean, some people like to do that, and that's great. Whatever you want to do. God honors our attempts. God honors every attempt we make at getting closer to him. And if you don't call him God, that's okay. Because I really like calling him Great Spirit. I really am very, very vested into Native American culture. Look, I checked out Buddhism. I checked out Hinduism. I checked them all out. But whatever it is, it doesn't matter. As long as it's a power greater than you. Because I alone cannot stay sober. I need you guys, and I need a higher power. And I want to thank you again, Mossy, for inviting me here tonight. Tonight for you, this afternoon for me. And thank you so much. And remember that if you think nobody in this world loves you, I don't even know you, but I love you because you're one of God's kids. And that's all I can say is I love you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michele. That was absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And I got so much from you, you know. There were certain words we never used in our house. We never used the L word, and we never used the S word. And L is for love, and S is for sorry. You never, ever used any of them. Which is a sad way to be. I learned what love was really inside in Alcoholics Anonymous. When people reached out to help me and drag me out from the gutter, I was there with my kids and with my wife, and it was all my fault. That's the only thing I knew on the 12th of July 1989, is that it was all my fault. And I've been given a life beyond my wildest dreams. You know, you spoke about the court sending people to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the reason I'm here is that about for this time, that he threw the big book at me. I was brought into it from virtually the first night I met him. And he promised me a life beyond my wildest dreams if I'd done what I told. and I lived that today. I'm just so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. And you reached into my heart there again. You know, the reason I do service is so that I can get people to speak and to reach into my heart and to carry me through. I've had some experience this week and it's just blown me away. It's just amazing what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me and for my family. So I thank you and all those that had the doors open for me, you know, when I was here. The last drink I had it with a guy that used to be 28 years sober. And I knew when I came back this time that I'm never safe. I didn't know the right words, but I knew I was never safe. So I'm forever vigilant. That's what I learned. And I do what I need to do to stay sober. And not that I've rabbited on long enough. Michele, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we'll hand you over to Mick the Ferret.
Thank you, Mossy. Thank you, Michele. Fantastic chair. I'm glad we split it both up. Really am. You know, I identify with so much of your story. You know, drinking was different because I worked in a brewery for 40 years, 13 drinking and 27 in recovery. And in our group, they used to say, if Mick can do it, anybody can. And I believe that today. You know, I loved your part when you were talking about your husband and yourself, because through Al-Anon and AA, you know, my wife was a black belt Al-Anon in the end. And, you know, and we grew so much together that we became soulmates. And you're on about your husband and dying and that. And I looked after her for, well, 3 years she was ill before she died. And something said to me, don't look at your losses, Mick. Look on what you gained through her. And anyone that died in my family, look what you gained. And that's what I do today. And when she died, just before she died, she wanted to be buried down by the sea. And then she said, that's too far for you to travel, Mick. I'll be cremated and ashes dumped up in the woods. And I said, yeah, I'll see to that. Then she said, I might be lonely. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll get cremated as well. And we'll have them joint together. And we'll be spread across the bluebells. And that's what's going to happen. And that's all through this fellowship. You know, what you can get out of it. You know, no, not what you get, what you do get out of it. You know, and I just love this fellowship. Mossy always keeps saying, I love this fellowship, and I do. I love the people. I might not like all of you, but I was shown that I had to love you. Cool.
And we go again. Hello, I'm Katrin. I'm an alcoholic to promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we'll be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. The fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realise that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialise if we work for them.
No, thank you, Katrin, and thanks, Jane, that read the preamble. I know a lot of people are going off to a big book studies to do on a Saturday evening. So I want to thank all the co-hosts, everyone that spoke, and Michele, especially you. You've done a fantastic job. And I appreciate you coming. And sorry about the confusion at the start. There you go, Mick.
A reminder that this meeting is on every Saturday at 6 p.m. UK time. And also that we have a meeting every day at 8:30 UK time, and we also have a lunchtime meeting every Sunday at 1 p.m. UK time. And this is a step 11 meditation meeting. And on Thursday evenings, we have a meeting at 7:30 UK time. We use the same code for all our meetings.
Stick around for fellowship after the meeting. If you want to break our room, we'll start it afterwards. And the yellow card, who you see here?
What you hear here,
When we leave here.
please let it stay here.
And that's it, folks. Only for Michele to lead us out with this serenity prayer. And again, Michele, thank you so much for sharing your message with us.
Thank you, Mossy. Thanks for asking. Thanks for all that's shared with me. Appreciate that. It all comes from God. My message comes from God. Thank you.
Yeah.
Serenity prayer. God,
God,
grant me the
grant me
serenity
the
to accept
to
the
accept
things
Things that cannot
cannot
change,
change,
courage
courage,
change, things that can,
and the
the
wisdom.
wisdom
to know the difference.
Thank you all.
Please stay.
Thank you
Mossy.
so much for a lovely meeting, and thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
so much.
Michele.
Yes,
Thank you.
beautiful.
Really, really, really.